Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Rosa and Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chawla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunella Rosa. This week, we're talking about the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, which continue, both of them with no end in sight. It's been a week filled with geopolitics on both fronts. Let's start, Brunella, first with what's going on in Ukraine. President Zelensky was in the United States, where he met, with all the main political actors, both the Democrats and the Republicans. I mean, tell me more about sort of what happened there. What was the purpose of his visit, and did he achieve it?
Yeah, President Zelensky went to the U.S. to meet with the key representatives of both parties. First of all, of course, the sitting president, Joe Biden, because he's still the one that's going to be calling the shots until January next year. And then, of course, the two main candidates, so Kamala Harris for the Democrats and Donald Trump for the Republicans. The idea was to present a peace plan. And this peace plan um, had a few points in it. First and foremost, there would be the idea that eventually Ukraine would be part of NATO, so full membership. The second is that there should be more sanctions on Russia. The third, that there should be a peace conference in November. And fourth, there would be the possibility for the Ukrainians to hit these bases from which the missiles are sent deep into Russia. Now, we have seen part of these proposals a few times in past. In fact, the first and the second point are not particularly new. The peace conference instead, third point, is kind of interesting. Previously, it was like not ideal to have a conference in which both Russia and Ukraine were present. Didn't seem right at the right time. And in fact, you may remember that there's been in summer in Switzerland a sort of peace summit uh, in which to which Russia did not participate. So unless you proactively and constructively engage Russia, it's going to be hard to have any meaningful peace conference in which both countries are there. Of course, the most controversial remains the possibility for Ukraine to hit targets in deep Russia, especially if using Western weapons, or let's call them NATO weapons, because Russia could interpret these as um, effectively and directly by NATO, which is the reason why they have created the nuclear doctrine, saying that doesn't need to be necessarily a NATO country to Russia in order for the nuclear weapons to be used, but it could be also country using their weapons. It's kind of tailored on these possibilities. So, on this, I think we'll remain stuck for a while, and definitely nothing is going to happen until the election results in the US are clear.
And another thing to come out of Zelensky's visit to the United States was his meeting with President Trump. Lots of sort of political commentators might not have seen this in particular coming. We're not precisely sure what a Trump presidency means for the future of Ukraine. Did this visit give us a better idea?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest achievement by Zelensky in the US. He met with Trump. He hadn't seen him since 2019, so way before um, the invasion took place. And we know that Trump considered himself to be a friend of Putin. In fact, even in front of Zelensky, he said, we have a very strong relationship with President Zelensky. And as you know, I do have a strong relationship with President Putin as well. And in that point, Zelensky interjected and said, and I do hope that you have a better relationship with me than with Putin, which, as we all know, is highly questionable. Trump said, well, it takes two to tango. So it needs to be, say, courteous also to Russia to make sure that it's engaged if like, any of those peace plans were to eventually work. But again, nothing will happen until it's clear who's going to win in November. And of course, nothing will be put in practice until the new president is sworn in January 2025.
Yeah. And then regarding the other open conflict that we see, I mean, the news of the week is the recent escalation between Israel and Lebanon and Hezbollah and Iran. I mean, this is really a war that seems to be edging on the biggest risk, which is the regionalization of what's happening in Gaza. So what exactly happened in the last week? What triggered it, and what will the consequences be?
Yeah, as we know, we have another open conflict near home in Europe, and that's in the Middle East. It started, as we know, with the 7th of October attack by Hamas to Israel. We are approaching the 1 year anniversary. Uh, we knew there would be some form of response by Israel. We never thought it would be that long, that deep, consequential. So Israel invaded the Gaza Strip, tried to eradicate Hamas. Whether this has happened or not, we don't know. We know that the casualties among civilians are in the dozens of thousands. So we are talking about a real massacre there. What has happened, of course, is that the political leader of Hamas was eventually found and killed. Um, and then they moved to the West Bank and started something along those lines there. Although the West Bank, to some extent, there's no presence of Hamas, so it seems like just a way of finishing the job. As it wasn't enough, then Israel started moving towards Lebanon and try to eradicate Hezbollah as well. And the thing that they did was killing, in fact, the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, that was killed in a bombing in Beirut. Now, um, as a result, Iran felt threatened. Two of its major organizations, allied of Iran in the region, had been decapitated. And so they launched missile strikes directly to Israel. So that's the real first serious exchange between the two countries in a few months, but especially this is much more, was aimed at damaging Israel much more than the small exchange that they had during the summer. It was more kind of a demonstration that is a bit tit for that. You do this to me, yeah, the same way. But it was like, but let's try not to escalate. This
Mm-hmm.
was instead an attempt to really damage Israel. Military bases were hit, some strategic targets were hit. What does it mean? Israel will definitely react. Question is there going to be an escalation, super escalation between these two countries? Well, this we don't know, and of course we hope that it's not going to be the case because that would probably become a proper regional conflict. And considering how big that region is, how connected these countries are, it might escalate even further. This is something definitely not to be hoped for. Clearly, Israel sees an opportunity in attacking Iran in a phase in which it's considered relatively weak and unable to respond, and definitely without the nuclear weapon. They see that the more they wait, the harder it will be. But here we need to be absolutely clear. Nothing will change in Iran unless you have a regime change. This regime will always act this way. They did go for a sort of detente with Saudi Arabia, which is a big step in the past, but they're not going to change their stance on Israel. So the reason of existence for the current regime in Iran is to destroy Israel. So is Israel willing to go for a regime change in Iran? Well, good luck with that. It might be much harder than they think. So, will the US go with Israel in this? Well, this is a bit more complicated. A Biden or Harris administration, for sure, no. It's really not in their interest to have open conflicts around the world. This is not how they perceive the role of the US in the region and globally. Trump is definitely more pro-Israeli than pro-Iran. Let's not forget that the first agreement with Iran was made by Obama 2015. So Trump is of a completely different view. But at the same time, he also wants to still appear as the one president under which no wars were fought. So will he really accompany Israel in this adventure in trying to go for a regime change in Iran? Well, that seems extremely unlikely to me. What does it mean of this? That we'll just need to wait to see who's going to win in November, see who's going to be sworn in as a president in January, see what has happened between now and January, and how the various countries will interpret the new presidency to choose their moves. So still lots to watch.
Yeah. Still plenty to watch, as you said, and with everything being decided almost entirely, or with, to large significance by what happens in the American elections. So it'll be a volatile period in early November, and one that we'll be covering extensively in the weeks to come. So as always, Brunello, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you. Until next time.